Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Maple Grove Scripture Reading Podcast. So we are still in Job chapter 31. We're working through Job's final defense, the series of oaths that he's making directly to God, laying out the full record of his life, and then saying, test it. Find the sin that explains what happened to me. He's not arguing theology with his friends anymore. He's making a legal case before God himself. So last time we were in verses 9 through 12, which we called the adultery oath. Job claimed that his heart was never enticed toward another woman, that he never lurked at his neighbor's door, and he called down a devastating curse on his own household if any of that was untrue. And then he described sexual sin as a fire that burns all the way down to destruction, which is the Hebrew word Abaddon, the place of no return, because that's what it does to a household and a life. It goes to the roots and it doesn't come back. Today, we're going to be in verses 13 through 23. It's going to be the longest stretch of the chapter, and it holds together as a unit because it's all about the same thing. It's about how Job treated the people around him who had less power than he did. The servants, the poor, the widows, the fatherless, the people who couldn't fight back. So let me read through it. If I've denied justice to any of my servants, whether male or female, when they had a grievance against me, what will I do when God confronts me? What will I answer when called to account? Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one form us both within our mothers? If I have denied the desires of the poor, or let the eyes of the widow grow weary, if I have kept my bread to myself, not shared it with the fatherless, but from my youth I reared them as a father would, and from my birth I guided the widow, if I have seen anyone perishing for lack of clothing, or the needy without garments, and their hearts did not bless me for warming them with the fleece from my sheep, if I have raised my hand against the fatherless, knowing that I had influence in court, then let my arm fall from my shoulder, let it be broken off at the joint. For I dreaded destruction from God, and for fear of his splendor I could not do such things. So this section opens with servants, male and female servants, people in Job's household who worked under him. And he asks a question that deserves a second look. He doesn't just say that he treated his servants well. He says, if I have denied justice to a servant who had a grievance against me. And that's a different claim. A servant having a grievance against his master in the ancient world was not a normal situation to acknowledge. Masters didn't typically invite review of whether they wronged somebody beneath them. The power differential made it easy to dismiss. And yet, Job is saying, my servants could bring a complaint against me. And when they did, I didn't wave it off. He then asks what he would do if God confronted him over it. What would he answer? And the implication is nothing. There'd be nothing to say because he would be in the wrong. He takes seriously the idea that God is watching how he handles the moment when someone below him in the social order says, you wronged me. And then comes verse 15, and it's the reason behind all of it. Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one form us both within our mothers? That's Job's argument. It's the same maker, same womb, same formation. The fact that one man is the master and another is the servant doesn't change what's true about both of them at the level that actually matters. God made them both. That's the foundation. You can't claim the dignity of being God's creature and then deny that same dignity to somebody who works for you. It's a simple idea. It's almost too simple, but Job builds his entire treatment of servants on it, and it holds up. Whatever difference exists between a master and a servant in terms of station or wealth or social rank, the thing that grounds human dignity, being made by God in the womb on purpose, well, that's shared equally. And Job knew it, and it changed how he acted. So the next stretch, verses 16 through 21, follows the same if I've done this wrong pattern that we've seen in the rest of the chapter. But what's interesting about it is what it reveals about the scope of Job's care. He's not just claiming that he didn't harm the vulnerable, he's claiming he actively took care of them. He says he didn't deny the desires of the poor. He didn't let the widow's eyes grow weary. That phrase carries the sense of somebody who's been waiting and hoping and watching for help that never comes. Job says, I wasn't that person. I didn't make people wait and watch and wear out. And then verse 18 cuts across the whole structure with something direct. He says, from my youth, I reared them as a father would, and from my birth, I guided the widow. That's not a hypothetical condition like the other clauses. It's a positive statement about his life. He's not just saying he avoided failure. He's saying this was his actual pattern all the way back to his youth. The orphan and the widow weren't charity cases that he attended to occasionally. They were people he treated like family. He raised the fatherless the way a father raises a child. He guided the widow the way a husband would guide a wife. It's an extraordinary claim, and it's not really about keeping an image. A man who treats orphans and widows well from his youth consistently without a crowd watching, that's not like reputation management. That's who he is. He goes on, clothing the naked from the fleece of his own sheep so that they blessed him for it, and not misusing his court influence to take advantage of the fatherless, even when he could have gotten away with it. He had pull in court. Verse 21 says that he knew it, and he didn't use it against people who had no power to resist him. There's a real test there in that last part. It's super easy to treat people fairly when the scales are even. The harder test is what you do when you have power and the other person doesn't. And nobody's watching closely enough to catch you if you lean on that. And Job says, I knew I had the advantage, but I didn't use it. So verse 22 follows the same logic as the adultery oath. If he raised his hand against the fatherless, let his arm fall off from the shoulder. Let it be broken off at the joint. The arm he might have raised to strike someone defenseless, let it go. The curse mirrors the potential crime. And again, he calls it down on himself voluntarily as proof. You only do that if you're confident or if you're lying and reckless, but we've seen enough of Job by now to know which one this is. Now, verse 23 is where Job names his motive, and it's something that we might not expect. He dreaded destruction from God. For fear of his splendor, he couldn't do such things. It's not, I wanted people to speak well of me. It's not that I was afraid of my community and what they would think. The thing that kept him from exploiting the vulnerable was his awe of God, his dread of God's judgment, the weight of God's splendor pressing on him. This matters because of where we are in the book. Job's friends have been spending chapter after chapter insisting that his suffering must trace back to some hidden sin, that somewhere, privately, Job must have been a different person than the one that people saw. And here Job is laying out the actual motivations of his interior life. He's not saying that he was afraid of being caught. He's saying he was afraid of God. He feared God's majesty too much to treat a poor man unjustly, too much to dismiss a servant's grievance, too much to let a widow grow weary waiting for help. And that's the hinge of the whole section. The ethics in verses 13 through 22 flow from the theology in verse 23. He treated people with dignity because he feared the God who made them. It wasn't for reputation, but it was because God was watching. And God's splendor was way too weighty to stand under with injustice in your hands. That's something pastors notice over the years. You can often tell more about a person's actual relationship with God by how they treat people who can do nothing for them than by anything they say or do in a worship service. The servant who can't advance your career, the widow who can't repay the favor, the orphan who has no leverage whatsoever. Job says his whole life from youth was shaped by how he treated these people. And the reason was God. Next time, we're going to look at verses 24 through 28, and we call it the idolatry oath. Job turns from how he treated people to what his heart ran to for security: gold and the sun, wealth worship and nature worship, the hidden heart sins, not just behavior, but what you secretly trust and secretly find wonderful. So that's what we'll look at next time. Till then, I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. God bless.